So, hello everyone. Thank you for waiting. I happen to be also the camera guy, so it took some time to set everything up. Welcome to the last panel of the festival. The title of this panel in Lithuanian was Ar mums Gaza rūpi? And I think the translation was a bit different, and the proper but not grammatically sound version would be, is it Gaza that we care about? So we will unpack several things. It might be chaotic, because the idea is chaotic in my head. And I think I think I was successful in letting my panelists know through our conversations that it is still chaotic, and maybe after the session we will come out with some thoughts cleared up. So I'd like to begin by asking you here, without any guilt tripping, without shaming, who here would say that they care about Gaza? Well, that's the place to ask. if anywhere in Lithuania, it's the place to ask. What if I would ask, do you really? I mean, how far does it go, you know? So, why are you here and not on the street screaming while genocide is happening, right? I mean, this is something to keep in mind, right? So that's one part, and also another part is why is the first part is why we who care do care, and why those who don't care don't, right? But these two are very interrelated, I believe. So let me ask you another question. How many of you here know anything about the Second Congo War? I see hands like some. Okay, so the Second Congo War went on from 1998 to 2003. It was 5 years. During the latter half of this war, around the year 2000, Second Intifada began. Do you know what Second Intifada is? There's way more people know what Second Intifada is, right? For those of you who don't, it was a Palestinian uprising. Differently to the first one, it was way more violent, and it was usually terrorist or so-called terrorist acts in Israel. That was probably the picture that anyone would take out of it. So at the time, some of us were already in the teens, around the early 2000s. And at least I remember vividly the news and almost daily news coming from Israel, showing these horror attacks within Israel, right? I don't remember anything about Sudan. I'm sure there was something, but it was probably very brief. Now, about Congo. Try and guess, see what's happening. Yeah. I really don't care. I mean, not enough to actually learn more about it, right? So guess how many, in your head, guess how many people died during the Second Congo War? So it was between 2.5 to 5.5 million. So if you start comparing atrocities in this sense, you will see that there's a huge gap. Do you remember Second Sudanese civil war? It went on for 2 decades, ended the same year that Second Intifada ended. So maybe you heard more about Sudan because it was probably more on the news. Death toll is between 1 and 2 million. So at a risk of sounding a bit like our opponents, Zionists, I'd like to ask you, why do you care about one conflict and you don't about others? And the question that our opponents, Zionists, I'm using this term broadly, and I don't want to go into discussion what means being Zionist or anti-Zionist. It doesn't matter here. You know what I'm talking about. So when they ask this question, they say, why do you care about Israel and you don't care about this, and that? And then they start naming Syria, Iraq, over 200,000 violent deaths, with excess death estimates reaching over 1 million in Iraq. But, you know, Iraq was on the news, people cared, people marched, right? But now when we are talking about Israel and Palestine, we have this question, you know, so you weren't that much vocal back then, right? Therefore, South Sudan, 700,000 deaths. Afghanistan, 200,000 deaths. Boko Haram insurgency, 350,000 deaths. Then they start naming Rohingya, Uyghurs, Tibetans, and so on, and the list goes like whatever. What they are doing, from my experience, is that they're looking for anti-Semitism in us, saying that, you know, you only care when it's Israel who is on the side that is killing people for them legitimately, right? So, and you don't care about others. Therefore, you're only worried when you have something bad to say about Jews, because Israel equals Jews in that context for them. So, I'm not posing this question as the way they do, but I also have a big question: why do we care, and how much, and so on. On the other hand, those who don't care, let's split them in two groups. And one group, maybe we should mention them, but it doesn't matter that much, is the group that general public, let's call them that, who don't know much, they don't care much, and that's okay, I suppose. I mean, it's not okay in broader scheme of things, but you know. But then we have our cultural, political elites and influencers now, who do care about the conflict, and they overwhelmingly, I mean, almost to the full, they support Israel, one way or another, from being silent to actively supporting, right? So what's happening here? In autumn this year, Israeli president is scheduled to come to Lithuania, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be greeted warmly. We'll see, but unless we do something about it. So, therefore, Israel, I would say, is going more lunatic and more crazy every day, and there's no one stopping them, right? So, and I think, we will hear what's the story in Latvia. I think that it's a similar story not only in Lithuania, but in the broader region. In Eastern Europe, although I heard that there are some bigger movements in Poland, but otherwise it's quite silent compared to Western Europe. There are many reasons for that, and so to unpack all this chaos, I will talk to Jana, who is from Riga, an activist. Maybe you will introduce yourself more. Justinas Šuliokas, who is a journalist. Should I mention your full credentials? He is an editor of Lithuanian National Broadcaster's website, lrt.lt, the English section of it, right? And we have Goda Jurevičiūtė, who is a human rights practitioner. Is that a more correct one than the advocate? And so I would like to start by asking a simple question: how each of you got into caring about Palestine, and more particularly today about Gaza.
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to see everybody here, especially for a Gaza panel, which is a very sadly contentious topic nowadays, for obvious reasons. But a little bit about myself. I am a regular activist. I'm representing the Latvian group, or not an organization. We are a movement called Palestinians, which is translated as For Free Palestine. Yeah. And I assume, like a lot of people here, and many in Latvia as well, who got sort of into this topic back in like October of 2023. Before that, I had some preliminary knowledge about what was happening in Palestine. I knew I first got introduced to the issue, the Palestinian plight back in like 2021, when I, like probably many of you, saw an interview with Abby Martin, where she interviewed Israelis in the streets of Jerusalem, where she was like talking to regular Israeli citizens about how they think of Palestinians. The comments that they made there were pretty horrific, and to me that sort of seemed abnormal, and I was like, why is nobody talking about this? Then I got reintroduced to the topic back in 2022 with the death of Shireen Abu Akleh, which was a Palestinian American journalist who was shot and killed by the IDF deliberately with the regular raids in West Bank. To me, it also seemed very strange that nobody in the Western world was talking about it, but it sort of moved on from there. And back in 2023, in October, when the Palestinian Hamas incursion began, probably like many of you, I understood that like the Palestinians are mounting a very big struggle, and that probably a lot of bad things are going to happen to them based on all the rhetoric that was there at the moment and even beforehand. But sort of in my mind, I was thinking about it and being like, okay, if things are going to be bad, then the West is sort of like gonna wake up, I guess. That was my naive belief, that like, oh, if the bombs are gonna be dropping like they were dropping beforehand, and even more intensely, with all the media that we have, the knowledge that we have, the availability of footage, I thought, okay, the West is gonna sort of wake up to this. And then week 1 passed, week 2 passed, week 3 passed, the schools started to get bombed, hospitals started to get bombed. You would see children dead, burnt, people fleeing their houses en masse, thousands and thousands of people. And in Latvia, you understood that like there's nobody talking about this, literally nobody. If anybody is talking about it, it's mostly the propaganda that you would see. And the regular Latvian media, you would see the citations of the IDF, the Twitter IDF, the Israeli Prime Minister talking points, all of their sort of Twitter tweets were sort of taken as granted, and nothing else was investigated. And so I guess for me, the way I more so got into this, and I believe how like a lot of people get into this, is that they see this injustice, this extreme level of violence perpetrated against a peoples, and then you see a contrast of how the governments, the politicians, the everyday people sort of talk about it, whether they do not care or support the other side. Start investigating all of this, and you're like, wait, hold on, whatever this other side is telling me, it's not true. I can go online, I can see all these people, I can see footage every single second on Telegram or on Twitter, wherever. Right. And I believe this is what sort of led me to be very interesting and caring at the beginning, primarily like for this specific topic, which is just like the contradiction itself, that is like, you see the reality and you see what is sort of the mainstream selected and perpetrated narrative by either the media, the politicians, or, for example, the people themselves.
Right. So, well, myself, I'm not an activist, and my knowledge and interest in the Gaza, Israeli-Palestine conflict pales in comparison to these guys. But I would say that my interest in the topic, it came together with my general, left-wing socialization. Because if you get into left-wing stuff, you cannot avoid the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And it's an issue that calls bullshit on all this very convenient narrative that we're living in the rules-based order, that we are on the side of rules, of international law, that we are the good guys. And when you look at this, it's so blatantly untrue, and it's the biggest elephant in the room that you can get. And especially after the Ukraine war, when for 2 years we were just flooded with statements about international law, about genocide, about crimes against humanity, war crimes, and all that, you would expect that these same people who are invoking these terms to talk about what Russia is doing, that you would at least use the same standards and apply it everywhere, not just to Russia. And again, this is just scandalous how that is not the case. And so I think this is what's most morally abhorrent. And this hypocrisy, it's a moral rot in our discourse, in our society, and as a member of this society, I feel responsible for it. And calling this bullshit is just, I see it as a duty of everyone.
Quite similar thoughts, but just trying to pin down when was the moment that I started to care, I'm not sure. But just when you start talking, I think it was because 9/11 happened when I was in school, and quite a lot of brainwashing was happening also in various classes. And as quite an idiot, I think, till the invasion of Iraq, and then I started to get lectures from, in Lithuania, quite known person who is named Račus. He's an expert on Middle East. And somehow he managed to show me the human beings, like Muslims is just, I suddenly woke up, I started traveling, I started to find out more. So first it's like just waking up from this Islamophobia that is pushed through many media and so on. So that first step. Then there was, in 2011 or 12, I went first time to Palestine. And I saw things that you cannot unsee. Then you see it was the tour to show us the realities of occupation. And when, I think it was in 2016 or 17, something happened to me that I decided to quit my job. And I went to stay for 3 months in Palestine, in a refugee camp. And I think from there I couldn't just turn around, because I am a witness and I saw things, and I'm not sure that I have like extremely good friends, Palestinians and so on. It's just when you see the complete injustice, it's you cannot stay silent. And honestly, until Tadas asked this question, I never thought why this conflict. I saw the situation of extreme injustice, and I thought I could not stay silent, even though I had the conversation with Israeli ambassador, because at that time I was already came back from spending time in a refugee camp, and I started working in newspaper who was quite, at that time newspapers was still there, it was quite, yeah, I'm from that generation, and they're quite on the right side, and I was like a thing out of nowhere. But I was starting like interviewing Gideon Levy, who is like an Israeli journalist, who is like a moral compass for me, and how to be in a society that is getting more and more extreme and still holding your truth. I interviewed people from B'Tselem, that's one of the most famous like Israeli human rights organizations, and probably this is why he came and wanted to show me, ask why I'm not writing about Israel, like advantages and stuff like this. And I said, until occupation is not over, I'm not gonna write about it. So, but for this discussion, I just started thinking why this conflict entirely, even though I actually care about Syria, and I didn't care, and I don't know a lot about Congo conflict, but I was in school and I was an idiot, so I think my knowledge, I was following Syrian conflict very much, and I'm still very much interested about the possibility to get justice for the perpetrators of war crimes and crimes against humanity, so I'm following what's happening now, so, yeah, but Palestine is the most important conflict for me, and it's not only Gaza. Gaza is just I think what's happening now in Gaza is just one of the biggest atrocities ever committed, like in the century. So, but why Palestine? So I started to think, and I had 3 reasons, and I'm not sure how will it sound when I am saying them all out loud, but they might be true. So one is the very banal. It's called Never Again, and my moral compass, what I have, what I consider atrocity, what's evil, and so on, happened through the history of Holocaust. And it's just, I asked myself, because I was thinking, okay, I would never commit atrocities, but would I have been brave enough to speak out? Would I have been even conscious enough to recognize, because the society would think that this is correct. So would I be correct to think, like during Holocaust, that I should help, I should not be afraid to hide people and so on. So, and this is might be an argument also for Zionists, because I then, people whose history taught me what it is right or wrong, like in like the most extreme sense, like no, then they commit these kind of atrocities. I see it more. It's just the things. I know it's not fair to say from them that you should know better, but oh my God, you should know better. You know, you were oppressed, you were killed, and so on. You should recognize then your society, your fellow mates doing that. So that's one reason. The second reason is gaslighting. I don't know how to name it differently. Name me any other conflict from your list that I would say I care for Syria. It's very important for me. Nobody would ask you like why, like. I mean, we might ask if they are racist and so on, but in general, they would understand that if you care from your humanity, and also in any other conflict, no one will make you question your own sanity as much as in Palestine, because everyone is apparently Hamas. Everyone is Hamas. Every child is a potential terrorist. Everything, every atrocity is justified because, of course, they were killing Hamas. I mean, on that school, and that school, and that school, and all the hospitals, and they need to be starved. And you think, like, what's happening? And then Israel comes on the stage of the world and says, we are the most moral country in the world. We are an avant-garde of civilization, and it's not even a joke. Like, we take it seriously. So. This is the second reason, because it makes me so mad. You know, if you would agree with me more that what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing, then maybe I would try and balance and also analyze other conflicts. And the third thing is what makes me not lose humanity, sanity at all. It's international law. And the thing is, international law is legal system is based like on history of colonialism, and it has still techniques of colonialism, you know. And but it stops somehow. Even it created this situation in Palestine. It stops somehow in Palestine. It does not work anymore. So I am interested how to use this international law. And to quote this legal expert, that I will not remember his name, but he is talking about using the master's tool to destroy the master's house. So I'm trying to learn that, and I'm interested in Palestine because it's, I think, the most interesting case, because international law cannot grasp the situation. I mean, it's not only genocide that's happening now, okay? It's apartheid, but it's not only apartheid. It's occupation, but not only occupation. It is discrimination if we take like Palestinian citizens, Israeli Palestinian citizens, but it's not only that, because the situation of Palestine is so much fragmented. So I think it is potential for new movement for international law to understand it. So yeah, that would be my reasons.
Can I add one more? Well, it's it's a conflict in which most obviously and most directly we as Europeans and as part of the West are involved. I mean, not that in these other conflicts the Europeans do not bear any responsibility through the legacy of colonialism and through globalized capitalist networks, but in this, it's very directly, we see Israel as our ally, as in the same camp in this global war of good versus evil, and we are the enablers of it. So that's another reason to care.
Yeah, so after this little digression to what is happening there, maybe we should return here, but you're already answering some questions. And I asked at first, is it Gaza that we care about? And I already hear from, maybe less from Goda, but from you two for sure, that it's actually, mostly we care about us, about our government, about our, people in power who support that, right? Anyway, but Jana already mentioned a bit of situation in Latvia. Maybe you would like to expand on this. Just, I will briefly introduce. So I wasn't in Lithuania for the most part of the last year, and as far as I know, there were 2-3 protests organized by, I'm sure, majority of the people who organized the protest in solidarity with Palestine are here. If I'm not mistaken, up to 100 people showed up at the biggest one, right? And the smaller ones were way smaller than that. And that was pretty much it. Again, I mean, thank you for the effort to all of those who organized. And I wish you wouldn't have to, it wouldn't have to be the same 7 people who do that. But we have what we have. So what's the situation in Latvia? As far as the, say, grassroots organization?
So the situation in Latvia, I assume, is probably very similar to the one that's in Estonia or Lithuania. I do not have that much knowledge about what's happening in Lithuania or Estonia, but from what I've heard from people, from talking to people here or just in general before that, it's quite similar. We in Moderator Palestine are the only pro-Palestinian group in the whole in Latvia, explicitly pro-Palestinian, that is mostly organized on the basis of Palestinian liberation and talking about this. We've organized 2 protests. One of them, or actually the initial one, was sort of canceled, and we also got into a sort of a bit of a legal battle with the Latvian state because of the way it was sort of canceled. But after that, we organized 2 protests, during which around 150 people came to both of those protests. One was in February, the other one was in April. But in general, the situation is a bit grim because on the one hand, we just do not care, in a sense that like Latvian society is very alienated politically. Even the political actions that we do have are very limited, and they're very sort of tepid, milquetoast, and very liberal in that sense that they're not asking for much. They're just like very scattered, very like no big movements around sort of social justice issues. And that obviously pertains also to Palestine. If anything, that's the probably should be the biggest one of them all. But because of any sort of lack of left movement in Latvia in general, there is virtually very little support for what we are doing. And that, beyond us not caring, we are also very aligned with the European Union. We're very sort of, not the European Union, but yes, the European Union and what the European Union countries are telling us to do. We're a very sort of neoliberalized society that focuses on ourselves the most. And in addition to that, we're also very not accepting of other of immigrants. We have our issues, for example, like the same as in Estonia with the Russian minority, especially since the Russian invasion. The tensions with that have been brewing before that as well, and ever since the fall of since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The tensions there have been rising, and ever since then, like, yes, the issue of integration of other people into our society has been problematic because we're because we're organized a lot on ethnic basis, and because of this, we also sort of receive this. There's a backbone of us not caring, and beneath that backbone, there's a foundation of racism and Islamophobia and just general xenophobia that we're trying to battle with our movement.
You mentioned, I mean, I started with other conflicts, and you also mentioned other conflicts. And the first initial reaction and the first thought is that this is the conflict where our governments, our people in power support the baddie, right? From the famous "Are we the baddies?" And yet, you know, I think that not knowing about other conflicts allows us to think that. Meaning that if you really dig deep into other places, into other conflicts, we would find that it was the same. We were complicit, we as in state and its government. We were complicit, maybe not participating I mean, we're not participating actively today. It's just you know, moral support and all that, and maybe some buying Israeli technology to control masses or something. Legal support, yes, that's true. That's true. So I'm guessing that there would be other conflicts, right? So now the question is what we know and what we don't know, and maybe we care about the things we know and not the ones that we don't know. And I will ask Justinas because he's here and he works at the Lithuanian national broadcaster. I checked. If you turn on their website lrt.lt, you will find hashtags on top of the page, and there are 5 of them. There is I don't remember exactly how it's written, but it's the war in Ukraine, Israeli-Hamas war. Then you have like news, like the very actualios, the very recent news, and then you have a couple more of popular TV shows. And the Israeli-Hamas war, of course, came into existence after the 7th of October. And when you click on it, you're literally one click away from all the feed since October the 7th. And there are over 1,500 articles on the topic. Now, if you search, for example, Sudan, I'm not even talking about Congo, but if you search for Sudan, you will find 10 articles in the recent year. Funnily, the one previous to the last one on the topic was titled "The Forgotten War: Why Nobody Cares." You know, I mean, and it was on the website that has nothing about it. So. And we also live in the age where, you know, the Zionist friends of ours, they would always say, you know, they learn all this bullshit on TikTok, and now they're talking bullshit on Facebook. So supposedly we are the generation where we got our news from TikTok, and TikTok is like the worst source that you can get, apparently. And, you know, I myself, I don't use TikTok, I mean, only for work. So it's not the source of my knowledge, and I'm sure it's not the source for most of us knowledge. So on one hand, we have this constant flow of information from national broadcaster and other news outlets, which are, you know, to say lightly, they're not objective, and you have a lot of it. So the conflict is forced onto us, and we supposedly know about it. And therefore, we get the Israeli side of information mostly, and maybe that's the reason why we don't care, because this is the war of civilizations and we're on the good side. So we're fighting baddies, that's that. On the other hand, few of us who do care, get crap because the information that we get is supposedly wrong because we get it on TikTok. And then the question is, so if we do get the information on TikTok and we're all brainwashed by Hamas, Putin, Iran connections, and all the you know, controlled information that we get, why is there 100 people in the protest? there should be thousands on the street, right? If actually TikTok is working, and and we get this propaganda from Hamas, so that why it's not nobody's there? Yeah. So again, convoluted, complicated thought. But maybe as a journalist, you have something to say about why this, not that, and how is it that this conflict gets so much attention from journalist side, and why the feed that we get is such?
Yeah, so the media. Let me tell you how it works. No, but so I will rely on the example of my own newsroom. It might differ in other places, but I'm pretty sure it's the same. So we have about 30 people, give or take, in the newsroom, and exactly 2 work with international news, so covering the entire world. Usually one of them during the day is in charge of what we call the stream, so they just look at news wires, they just monitor the media, and whatever happens, they just spend 10 minutes on covering that and stuff like that, and posting it on social media, coming up with headlines and all that. The other one, meanwhile, has time to focus on feature stories, and they usually have half a day or a day, 2 days if they're lucky or if the topic is complicated. But during that day, they have to produce a story on a topic which is very likely they have no previous knowledge about, about the conflict in the country, both of which they've heard just 10 minutes ago. So we spend 10 minutes on Google research, then the rest of the time you try to find 2 or 3 experts to interview about it, and then just put down whatever they said. And this is the pressure that these people work under. So there is no chance of any sustained expertise, any nuance. It's just, it's a factory of feature stories. And when it comes to experts, there's another can of worms in itself. Like usually those experts that are most available, they come from think tanks, and think tanks, they're not neutral experts. They're basically expertise, opinions for hire, and those are most easily accessible. Those that you email, and 5 minutes later they will email you back with a list of people you can call right now and interview and get some quotes for your headline. These are the think tanks that push very certain narratives, and they have certain interests, and that's how it works.
And they're being paid not from LRT to come on the interview, but while they're at the interview, they're working.
Nevertheless. Yeah, so in order to, and as you said, Israel has an awesome PR machine. And in order to counter it, you need to have resources that these 2 people in our newsroom, who are not experts on any particular issue, they simply do not. So what they take is just whatever is available, and they just regurgitate those same platitudes that you hear all over. And when it comes to international news, we do not have reporters in the Middle East. We do not have reporters even in most European countries. Well, LRT now has 2 reporters in Brussels and 1 in Washington, and this is all this is all that we have outside of Lithuania. Most others are in Vilnius, and so what they do, they just read whatever is on the New York Times or the BBC, mostly those 2. And I mean, if you cover it in a similar way that the New York Times does, then it's fine. Then this is the standard of objectivity that you have. Yeah, then I have another point to make. Like this is a problem internal to our media landscape. Another thing is that the journalists, the media people, they share all the biases that are held by our elites. And I think that our elites have this perverted fantasy of reliving the Cold War. Like their glee and their enthusiasm by which they embrace this image of the world in that we're in 2 camps. We're the good ones, they are the bad ones. It's just sickening. It's very straightforward, and it's, I don't know how it's intellectually sustainable, but it is. And of course, we want to relive the Cold War, except this time be on the other side, and the side is the American side. So whoever is the enemy of the United States is automatically the enemy of Lithuania. And likewise, the friends of the United States is automatically the friends of Lithuania. Otherwise, you don't want to be with Russia or with China. Because if you're not with us, you're against us. This is the thinking that pervades the media.
Can I just I graduated from political science in Vilnius University because you mentioned War of Civilization. At my time, okay, I was studying from 2003 to 2007, and then 2 years of masters. We still read Huntington as without irony. Honestly, and I met people in the conference where I was talking about Palestine also, asking me questions from Huntington as as normal question, like we still think like this, and this situation after October 7 was constructed like this because we are fighting the war. Somehow we also are fighting war against evil, and this is Israel are the good guys, and you think how it is possible. So yeah. But because our elites, political scientists, are reading this without any context, and this is the same guy, Dunas Račis was the first thing. It's like, why are you kidding me? We're not going to read that book,
That's also, I think we're still very much wannabe West. Deep down, we don't believe that we truly are, so we take all these Western narratives much more seriously. We stick to the conflict of civilizations things and all the others that even in the West they would not be uttered with such a straight face that Lithuanians still use them. So, axis of evil, rules-based order, the West, it gives you cringe whenever you hear it, but people are saying that in all earnestness.
But you already drifted, and that's good because I also want to leave room for discussion, but you already drifted into why we don't why they don't care. The people who would come on to comment, the people at universities, the people in power, why they don't care. And on the one hand, yeah, they do believe still this war of civilization, and they talk about it as we all know on live TV and radio. And on the other hand, there should be, it's not only us that have TikTok. I'm using TikTok as a metaphor here. And today, when you have live coverage of a genocide, I'm sure there are many people who reluctantly, but opened and watched something. They got some information. Maybe they even noticed that International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court, that they have some kind of cases going on, right? So, they should know. And I'm sure there are people in power in the universities and everywhere that, something had to click. And yet, we have silence. We have a common friend and colleague, I'm not going to mention names, who we know that they understand what's happening, and yet there is silence. So you have from silence to active support. So what the hell? Why no one is talking? There might be other reasons, right? It's not. The point is that it's not like all of those who are in power that would come out and talk about Huntington and with this seriousness. It's not that.
But you do not need to talk about Huntington. You have just to think. This is how you frame the how to say the world. This is how you see the world.
Do you think majority of them do?
Because even my lecturer, who I'm gonna name, he's Žilinskas. He's an expert of international humanitarian law, and the thing he posted after October, he didn't mention anything else anymore, at least on his Facebook. But he said, because it is Hezbollah and Iran and so on, so this is sort of already everything is understand after what happened on October 7th. So everything is understandable. There are two sides, and I'm now on the good because Russian is in that side. So we are if you want to be on the right side. Not directly like that, but that's like his first reaction. And I mean, if you go on Facebook and post it, you have to think it. So this is one thing, but we ever, even though I know, because in every course that I had studying international law, I would talk about Palestine and try to understand why it's not working for Palestine. And I know that his thoughts are a little bit nuanced more than that. But I think that for a lot of people after October 7th, the brain freeze, it's impossible to understand what's happening, because I'm not sure if it's exactly what you wanted to hear, but the thing is, for me, it's, I mean, if you try to give a context to October 7th, that's impossible. You are a Hamas supporter, no? And this is, I think, what Palestinians always lack. And even those who comment, it's to understand this in a context and to understand history. Because Palestinians act out of, I don't know, they are mad, they do not act and do not react. Israelis always react to something. They are like justified because they are attacked on October 7th, but Palestinians never react. And it's like everything that happened before October 7th cannot justify the October 7th, but everything what's happening after October 7th can be justified because of October 7th. And people think like this. And coming back to your things that they see on the algorithm, well, on one side, algorithm, I just want to say that I see things because my algorithm says like this. I like on my Twitter, I have international law experts. On my Instagram, I have people who are like journalists in Palestine and so on, or Mehdi Hassan or Ayman from MSNBC. And because I watch that, they give me that. So it could be that they see the same facts, but just how they are explained differently. For example, because people really believe that in Al-Shifa hospital, that was evidence, that they showed these few guns and one computer that also had, like maybe it was like some picture of the hostage, and that's sort of this is the reason why it was worth to destroy the hospital. And for them it's fine. So I don't know, my algorithms are different, and I see, could be that I see a little bit different feed. So.
Well, I think part of the reason why, like, sort of a lot of people do not care, again, I agree with Justinas a lot, is the fact that, like, this sort of European values notion that we have in the Baltics, especially, because in the Baltics we are the followers of what the EU or America says. Also, we do not have like very big leftist movements. Whatever left you adhere to, we just do not have any big movements. If you look at sort of any social justice movements in the last 10 years, 15 years, you'll see that none of them are existent in, I will be speaking about Latvia specifically, but none of them are existent in Latvia. Even the thing that we're sort of most dear and proud of, which is our nature, the fact that we are deforesting at extremely high levels, the fact that there's pollution at extremely high levels, the fact that like in seas and rivers, they're uninhabitable for the life that it's supposed to exist there, that like the pollution levels there are so off the charts, is not reaching any sort of mainstream attention. The movements that we do have are this sort of progressive movements, which most often than not align with the neoliberal status quo, which with like sprinkle of with a bit of sprinkle of rights for LGBTQ people, which are very, very important. But the sort of structural things that we should be advocating for, there's just not there. We do not advocate for actual like policy changes. We do not actually advocate for more, I don't know, workers' rights or increased some environmental protections or any other things that sort of we as leftists are supposed to care about. And I believe that in Latvia specifically, is that what I've noticed and what I've read is the fact that, one, we're very individualized, we look at ourselves, if you look at everything before 2022, every statistic before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we'll see that like we do not believe our government, we don't trust them, there's lowest voter turnout ratio, and whenever we sort of talk about the government, we talk about it some external other that they don't care about the people, in which we sort of say that like there's a government, we can't really do anything about the government, so we sort of need to do everything ourselves. We need to make our own reality, not participating in politics. After 2022, obviously there's a bit of shift in all of this because of another aspect that we have, and I also previously mentioned, which is the xenophobia aspect, the fact that we are incapable of coexisting either with the existing minorities that we have, either the Russian one or the refugees that are in our borders that are coming to us, not even refugees, but in general, just people who come here for work. They might be from any global south country. We'll still see them as some sort of other people who are somehow, some way, well, we need to integrate them, yes, but we need to integrate them on our European sort of standards or levels or like values, whatever we espouse.
I have an itch in my brain that it cannot be that simple. I mean, you can, in a way we have all the answers why the general society doesn't care, and then we also have all the answers why the elites don't care. And I have a few things. We have history of Holocaust and memory of Holocaust, which is probably more important for this question, the way it is being used and abused. We have politics of today, which you mentioned, alliances with NATO and the goodies and the baddies. We have Israeli lobby, and we have pressures. We have Islamophobia and xenophobia that you just mentioned on the flip side, in a way. And does that really explain it? Why we don't care? We, as in general society, and so the general society probably doesn't care that much about the memory of Holocaust, and therefore that's not an argument for them not to care what's happening. But then, let's say, for the elites, maybe it is the lobby that is more important. So it depends on whom we're talking about. But in general, we have a long list of reasons why we have this situation. Is that the answer? Is it more complicated than this? Because I feel that there should be something else. Right? Do we actually, can we just come to a conclusion that that's the reason, right?
Well, I think one other aspect that we're not sort of mentioning, in Latvia, it's obviously a very big issue, but in general in Europe as well, the history and understanding of colonialism and imperialism are still very much present. This is the reason for why Israel actually exists. It's originally a white settler colony that was perpetrated by white Christians and the elites back in the 19th century. And to me, the way how I sort of see it is that like we're still a part of this empire in which still in some way or another colonizes the other world. We can go online, we can see all these atrocities. For example, in the same Congo that you mentioned, we'll see the minds of children, 5, 6-year-olds digging in the cobalt mines, bringing the cobalt from one place to another. Understand that like that cobalt is meant for the devices that we use right now, the iPad that you use right now, the microphone that I also use right now, but not do anything about it because we benefit from it. This gives us comfort. We have comforts that are sort of given to us via the imperialism that is ongoing right now, be it in Sudan or in generally in Congo, or we talk always about, not always, but we talk about like, oh, the sweatshop labor, but a lot of us still sort of sweatshop labor in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, whatever it might be. We still go to H&M, we still go to all these fast fashion stores because those are comforts that sort of are given to us, and we are given the ability to use them. And because of the fact that like actually advocating for things would be counterproductive to the comforts that we sort of have right now. And I also feel that this is important not to moralize a single person. Like it's important, in my opinion, to understand these issues from a very structural perspective, not moralizing every single individual and being like, okay, you're a bad person for, I don't know, shopping in Zara or H&M or Temu or whichever store, or supporting like buying iPhones and iPads, or like in context of Palestine, going to Starbucks. You should be doing like whatever you can be doing, but also it's important to understand that like there are structural reasons for why sort of these things happen, and we need to understand why and how we can sort of fight these things.
Do you see any other reasons?
Well, it's that all if you name all, that's not enough for you. And I also just think like, yes, like what else? Colonialism, racism, Islamophobia, like Holocaust. But also, I think it takes a lot of time. It honestly takes a lot of time to care. And I mean, I pushed back my master's degree because I started reading about Palestine because I wanted to have a knowledge about it. And also if I am watching videos in the morning and in the evening because I care and I want to care. This is, I don't know if you knew, recently there was like a story about pianist who was reprimanded because he like dedicated one concert to the lost lives of Palestinian journalists. But now the bosses who like forced him, didn't want to invite him for the concert. So all the other artists get rid of their bosses. So like I don't know if I said it clearly, but there is one piece that he dedicated, and somebody reads over. He's playing that I will not look away. I will not look away. No. And it's so easy just to look away. And I think it takes a lot of time to care because you have all your life, you know, nobody, at the moment, how many people actually really care about Ukraine? Also, it's gone, but we're tired. I mean, once in a while, if somebody collects money for weapons, which, by the way, one weapon was made by Israel, so one have to choose which you care more. So I don't know. It takes a lot of time, and we care about things that are closer to us.
Yeah, I think the sad part about this tragic is that it might be too late. You know, in this case. It takes time for us, but it might be too late. So the last question before we open up to the public is do you have any prescription out? So what do we do? How do we care at large? How do we make people care? I don't know. That's a silly way to say it, but you understand. And maybe enable those in power, I mean, and some with some sort of power, even small, soft ones, people in academia, people in journalism, and in these positions to be able to say things without being afraid, to be able to have time to talk to you instead of you know, people who come from think tanks, and yeah, what is there anything that we can do? It's not like we're gonna just all get up now and start doing. It's just
that's. I don't.
In a way, we're doing it for a very small audience that will. I mean, here I don't think anybody needs to, you know, to know anything more about this, but yeah, maybe someone will see us.
Well, you were talking about. Facts are available for everyone to see. There's social media, and they can see all the effects of Israel's atrocities in Gaza. So more people should see the facts, and they will make up their mind. But I don't know if that's how it works. I think it doesn't really. what really tips the opinions of the undecided is that knowing that there's a mass of a certain opinion. Yeah, a critical mass. It doesn't have to be the majority, but has to be. They have to know that certain points are acceptable to be raised, because at one point in the first initial weeks after October, like saying anything about context was just, you couldn't say that without being labeled a terrorism supporter. Yeah, I think it has gotten better because more people came forth. These opinions are more reflective, and just the very knowledge that there is such opinion and that it is being expressed, it helps.
I just wanted to add a bit on what Justina said. Obviously, this whole the Palestine genocide is a very difficult topic to convey to people, especially with the amount of knowledge and available information and footage that is everywhere on social media. You can show, I don't know, dead bodies to somebody who doesn't care, probably will not influence them much. So you have to talk about it as much as possible. But also I think it's important to understand, and also to sort of coming back to one of the points that you made previously about why this topic. I think it's important to talk about this topic, conflict specifically, because it's such an eye-opener. For a lot of people, this the genocide ongoing in Gaza is the thing that radicalizes them, because it doesn't go. It's not only about Palestine and Gaza or West Bank. It's about the whole world and sort of the systems that uphold what is happening in Gaza, the same systems that are also linked to the issues in Congo, Sudan, Yemen, or any other country that is experiencing such hardships. And I believe that, like, this, to make people, if we make people understand that this is one of the issues that, like, is upholding a lot of other issues, it's going to be easier to move forward with everything else that we want to change in our society, be it from, like, environmental issues, because the issue with Palestine is a holistic issue. It's not only about that. In the US, for example, there's a conversation right now happening about the undecided voters in swing states, for example, before the election, who are saying that, like, well, we're not going to be voting because, well, this is a genocide happening. And the other opposition, usually the Democrats, for the Democratic Party, they say that, like, oh, you are a single issue voter. But when that single issue encompasses all other issues, from domestic violence, terrorism, apartheid, sexual harassment, beings, imperialism, military apparatus, and everything else, it becomes a whole sort of issue that you understand that, like, well, there are so many other things that are linked to one another. And yeah, in my opinion, it's just important to talk to people, make it relatable to something that they can understand, because Palestine can be related and connected with a lot of different issues that people care about, and just try to bring those people to an understanding of, well, things can be better and things should be better, and we, as Europe, who's financing the atrocities in Gaza, should be also moving towards and helping Palestinians.
I'm afraid to ruin, because it's so beautifully said, but it hit me just now very hard what Tadas said, that it might be too late because Gaza is unlivable. I think it is now already unlivable. And yeah, we have a possibility to stop genocide, and we decided not to stop genocide. So, but in that case, I'm recently spending time listening to Arundhati Roy, the Indian writer, who talks about how separating the hope from reason. And I am very pessimistic person, but it does not make me like not do something, and I have to find my place in this situation and not give up, because in the end, like before apartheid, the end of apartheid in South African Republic, nobody believed that it is possible, and also in Vietnam War it seems unmovable and so on. So one has to hope and find this hope, and I think that I found like my niche, but I still need to work a lot on it, that nobody from academic society and international law experts, nobody is actually talking about it, and I don't understand how. So for me, I know it's not enough, but this is like to my mission that I try to find is to give back Palestinians the history and context, and I think this is extremely important. And also because you said you opened the floor, but I think I see a couple of people who are organizing things and screening movies and so on, just to make people see the human beings in Palestinians. I think this is what is lacking. So yeah, that's I think what can be done.
I think we could go on like a lot. I mean, but let's. It's the last session, and let's open to the floor if anyone has questions.
So, would you, Tadas, add something to your own questions? Of why?
How much time do we have? I'm not in that capacity now, but I mean, all of them were. For me, the most the reason why this panel happened and the question that it raises is that back in December, so I because I still want to remain somewhat sane, I go offline from reading news what's happening in Gaza every once in a while. And at some point in December, approaching Christmas, I think, it's been around 2 weeks, I stopped following. Because I mean, it gets to a point where you have nightmares. I have a daughter, and it's especially, it becomes closer. And so at some point you switch off just to remain somewhat sane. And then back then I started thinking. I started writing an article which I'll never finish, and the article was exactly about this: do I really care about Gaza? What I realized that is. Before I did an interview with Qasem Ali, who the interview you can find on ChatGPT. I spent 4 hours with him in the room in where he was staying at the time, and it was the longest period I've been with a Palestinian, and he was maybe the third or fourth Palestinian I've met in my life, the ones that I knew about. Maybe I met the ones that I didn't know that they're Palestinian. And so he told me a story, and I did another interview with Majd through online, and I realized that it's not, there's nothing particular. I don't know the language, I don't know the culture. Yesterday, with all due respect, I mean, this is a personal preference, there was music playing, I would guess, let's call it Arab music. I'm sorry for my lack of knowledge, and I don't enjoy it. I mean, it's not, it's not my thing, and I really don't care about those things. So that, I mean, what I do care about is that it doesn't matter who the people are. So, and then I started thinking, if I would know more about another conflict, and I would know more about the involvement of the West and us in one way or another, maybe I would care about those people more. And the reason I care about this one is because I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm editor at gpb, Gyvenimas per brangus, but the way I got into the topic is through Jewish studies. During my BA year in history, I started taking all the courses possible related to Jewish studies. Then I did my master's with Jewish studies specialization, and then I never finished my PhD in Jewish studies. So I've been there for
years in academia and Jewish studies. Through there, I met Israelis. I met American Jews who live in Israel, and they started telling me stories. Eventually, they took me to places in Israel, and I spent a day in Hebron as well. And therefore, I care. I mean, and then I started thinking that maybe I care actually about us, about our moral compass, about our government, our influencers. So, I mean, if for those not from Lithuanian speakers, you won't understand, but we have a one very influential influencer, and if Tapinas flipped sides, we would have thousands of people on the street, right? I'm guessing it would happen anyway. So so that's why this panel came up, and it's not, these are the answers that I have for now. Caring deeply about people that I don't know. I don't, there's no actual, reason why it should be like this. So that's why I started raising this question. And the reasons that I mentioned, that why those with power don't care, I mean, I believe that's the answer. I've been following the situation for the last 15 years. I've been following because of my Jewish studies background. I have, my feed is really not TikTok Hamas propaganda. I get both sides a lot. And I see the internal discussions within diaspora Jewish communities. I see internal discussions certain parts of Israeli society, and I see the way like all these things come into one. I see the commemoration of Holocaust, the memory of Holocaust, the way it is being used and then abused, and then I see the Israeli embassy open up, before it was in Riga, and the ambassador was covering Lithuania in 2014 or 15. They opened an embassy in Lithuania. I start seeing ambassador, and suddenly in all these cultural events related to Yiddish something in 18th century, and the ambassador comes, and then there is even if the slightest topic drifts towards conflict, Israel or anything, it's very complicated. I was telling Goda, I was moderating a discussion at the Vilnius Jewish Library, and it was about the memory of Holocaust. And what I said was maybe we should teach more and think more about genocide in general. That was 2015, 16. I said maybe we should talk more about genocide, giving Holocaust a particular place, because it was an extraordinary genocide. I mean, it was completely different, and I have a lot of problems with all the comparisons between the Holocaust and what's happening now. And so the simple thought that maybe we should concentrate on genocide and not on Holocaust as such was met with, I mean, I had long discussions after the event, because people were like, no, I mean, the only genocide is Holocaust. I mean, that kind of thinking, right? So with all these things come together, the lobby, all of these things, yeah, it feels like I was trying to provoke, maybe you will tell something else, and you did, thank you. But all of these major things, plus Islamophobia, and you have the result that you have. So
yes, like one of these, I guess, like semi-selfish, semi-paranoid things and thoughts that I have about why I care, like one of the reasons. And I guess it's a good place to start with what has been happening in the UK in the past 2 weeks. For, I don't know, just in case you hadn't been following this particular chain of events. So basically after decades of right-wing discourses and anti-migrant discourses, masses of far-right thugs basically just went to the streets targeting specific mosques, specific people. Basically, yeah, this is where like I can't find a reason for a definition of a pogrom not to fit the situation. And so looking in, let's say, Lithuanian context, or at Lithuanian context, I'm just kind of having this feeling that we are, with these conflicts which are distant, or we don't care about the music, let's say, or anything like that. But in each of these cases, when we start talking about it, we start normalizing certain stuff, and we start producing justifications. And so for me, I think the first big red flag in the recent, let's say, events was 2021, when people were being pushed back from the border in a very violent way, when dead people were found on the border, and somehow it was normalized and justifications were produced, and there was very little pushback against that. And now with Gaza, since October, again, we see justifications for why children are being killed, and this is again just being normalized. And I'm just kind of having this feeling that we'll just like sleepwalk into something maybe similar like in the UK, or maybe something worse, or something that will take a different shape. And so yeah, this is just my kind of paranoid thought that these kind of events, anytime they are addressed, they just normalize and produce justifications for things for which there cannot be a justification.
I could just add that probably the way Israel went in the last decades is the, I don't know, encyclopedic example of normalization of, I mean, whatever it takes, you know, the boundary is pushed further every time, and every time it becomes new normal. Before this war, the previous killings were huge, were unimaginable. 18,000 buildings collapsed, 2,200 people killed, 550 of them children, you know, 1,700 of them civilians. That was the horrible number. That was, I don't know, 2 hours on October 13. And now that's normal. So, yeah.
Also add that I think, if I'm not mistaken, then in Lebanon, Sabra and Shatila massacres was happening, also genocide of Palestinians in refugee camps, with sort of enabled by Israeli occupation forces. A lot of Israelis went to the streets protesting, like 100,000, and now nothing. So it also says, like, because even like if you care about Israel, if you care about people in Israel, how horrible it is now that they are getting more and more and more extreme. And this is normal, even like if you do not take Gaza, but if you take West Bank, that settlers are going and burning the houses of Palestinians. This is extremely crazy. And talking about the paranoid feeling concerning the pushbacks, that's also another topic that makes my sleep more difficult. It's how it was normalized, because I was thinking like, my work is related to the trying to convince the government officials just to return to the international norms, but I'm very unsuccessful in that area as well. So my two favorite topics, refugees and Palestine, very optimistic. But the thing is, I'm always thinking that when we are lowering standards here, like for example with refugees, how can we convince Pakistan to keep the refugees of Afghanistan, and they are not keeping anymore, but how can we, because the most refugees are not in the Western countries, no? Now with Ukraine refugees, the situation a little bit different, but this is like more than 80% is still in Global South. So how can you then go and convince somebody to do something else? And also, like in Gaza, I see the burying down the international humanitarian law just completely with the help of Americans. So like the next conflict that would involve also maybe against us and so on, the standards will be also lower. So if you don't care about Palestinians as human beings, but this effect will be catastrophic. So I am totally, completely paranoid about this, but also at the same time, I'm keeping myself radical hope, no matter what. Yeah.
Just a very, very short thing that some of the first Israelis that introduced me to the topic, they would themselves tell me that they don't care about Palestine and Palestinians. The reason why they're protesting, and the reason why they would be sitting here and understand everything that we're saying and agree with this, is that they, I mean, it's in a way Zionist, they are afraid that Israel, that was 2009. Back then they said they were afraid that Israel is going into self-destruction. So they cared about Israel, they didn't care about Palestinians, and they were, participating in movements together with Palestinians for Palestinian liberation or whatever it was.
So I wanted a bit to comment about the caring. Okay. So yeah, this question of how to make people care is quite daily for me, and like maybe in other places, and more from this union organizing, and it's also, I think, a question of how we do politics as such, because I think a lot of our activism is based on the idea that you have to make people care about something, and the problem is not only that people don't care about Palestine, but I guess, well, climate crisis, I don't know, anything, you name it, yeah? And we have this feeling that, yeah, this is like a very small niche that we have here, people who come, who care, and we are kind of glad about it. But I think from my perspective, why this, let's say, general public, yeah, why people don't care, is that somehow capitalism gives naturally enough things to care about on a daily life. If you're a worker, if you have family, if you have kids, and you don't want more problems, you have enough of them, and they're quite serious, like daily problems. So I think we get this backlash when we choose this method of trying to raise awareness, yeah, how we say it, and we get this backlash from people because they don't want their awareness to be raised, because we all know ourselves also that that doesn't make us happy. Like, this is the thing with caring. Until you don't care, you might live a happy life in your own bubble with problems and something, but once you care, you cannot uncare. And when you open the door, it's not the happiness that we find here, but of course it's a sense of dignity and a sense of righteousness, yeah, in some way, which gives some meaning for what we do. And I think this caring, that's why we also have people, I think, here who either studied or either have time in life when they have time to think about the world, to have time to think about other stuff, not that is directly immediate in your life. And this was the point where we politicized, we radicalized, I think, a lot of in academia and so on. And I think it's important, it's a very good thing to have this experience. And but it's somehow important to realize, I think, these material conditions which allows to care or not. So thinking about the strategy, how we can, let's say, still raise the movement for the support of Palestine, or maybe more generally, I don't know, anti-colonial movement, yeah. So I think asking questions, so, okay, what is our own interest in this? And I think one of the things that we should really think about is, of course, pushing the elite, but also maybe formulating a foreign policy that is not based on like licking the balls of the powerful friends. And this is actually it's even inscribed in our constitution, not directly, but like by explanations of the Constitutional Court, that our state in itself, by its own constitution, has a geopolitical direction that is set to the west. Yeah. So, and I think this leads us to very dangerous situation, because we are a small country. Any kind of war will destroy us, especially all this region. And I think in that way, we need to support the small nations, the ones who try to assume independence from whatever power. And maybe through that whole, we can formulate like a foreign policy that probably, everybody will say it's crazy, but I think we might try to convince that, well, this is the way how we can assume peace in the world and also have safety for ourselves. So yeah, but it's but I wanted to thank actually Tadi and Goda and for this GPB coverage. I didn't care to read every day, and I was like, thanks God there is somebody who does it, and you can watch this informative videos and know what's happening. Yeah, and so thank you a lot for this work.
Thank you, Jürgen. You, as a true Marxist, you came in and you painted the whole picture, you know, from a different perspective, which I think was very important, which we really missed.
Hi, yeah. So first I want probably to add up, yeah, the reasons why people don't care, or they do care but they are afraid to care. Maybe it's like, I think there is a fear of being manipulated, and like this of the kind of situation when the opinion is not being made because, like, okay, what if my opinion is not the right one, and then I don't have an opinion, and the situation when you have to have an opinion, you just have a safe one, you know. Like, so, but basically it's not yours, it's just like your state's opinion, like the one which doesn't make you into troubles, but like it's, yeah. And then the question, I will give a bit of context. So in the place where I work, it's like art residency, and it belongs to Vilnius Academy of Arts. There is an exhibition right now, which is called Resonance Beyond Escape. And the part of the exhibition is, the graffiti, a big graffiti on the facade of the building, which says, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And there was a Palestinian flag. Yes, and then inside the exhibition there is a big Palestinian flag hanging, and there is a row of flags like Palestinian, Sudanese, and Congolese, and then Ukrainian was added later. Because of the context, there was a conversation between the collective who curated the exhibition and our director, and then there was like, why there is no Ukrainian flag? Like, why do you not care? Do you not care about Ukraine? Okay, here is the Ukrainian flag. And then there was like, we had a group of Belarusian students, like not only Belarusian, but also Belarusian students staying in the house, and there was the question, why not the Belarus, like, you know. And then like, what next, like what other flag should be added, like probably the list is really huge. But actually there was a very, I want to share this just experience. I was there in this exhibition hall, on the ladder hanging the huge Palestinian flag, and then the curator of the exhibition was sharing the situation of like the proposal or the question, why to hang Belarusian, like why not to like add this one? And they were sharing like what? How? Like, no, do you think it's a, and then I was like, okay, so where is the limits of the solidarity, and how the flags can be corrupted by some ideas of I don't know, like probably like lack of knowledge maybe about the context, and like what I actually even don't know if the curator thought of which flag, you know, and like what would be the flag. I'm not sure. So I was there hanging and feeling as if I don't know what I'm supporting right now, like the general awareness of the liberation or the flags themselves. So. And that leads to my question. Disclaimer, I don't believe in national state. I think the sleepwalking into, like, I don't know, the overwhelming massacre is like through the national state. And then my question, do you feel or see or experience the ways of solidarity and the gathering and like doing things together for the liberation without the flags, or it's only with the flags? I don't know, like, but for me, I have so many troubles with flags, really.
I personally, I don't think I ever used Palestinian flag in any context. I share the feeling.
I feel like using the flags is
to some extent pretty important, because, for example, with the Ukrainian flag, we all understand what the struggle is about. Nobody before, not nobody, but a large majority of people before October 7th didn't understand, didn't know about Palestine. If you ask a lot of people right now about Palestine, they'll be like Pakistan or something like that. The same with, they'll not be able, for example, to differentiate between the Palestinian and Jordanian flag because they're so similar or something like that, or the Sudanese flag or something like that. So from that sense, I think it's important to not focus them, but involve them to also to involve these flags to show that there's just not one nation and or one people that is going through struggles, but a lot of them. But through that, to also understand that, and we probably, the people who have been, as you taught us, and I think it relates to the initial point that you were making about like the different genocides elsewhere. It's often used as a gotcha, as something that like, oh, you care about Palestine, what about this? In the meantime, they sort of acknowledge that like Palestine, as other issues, is something to be cared about. They're just trying to deflect from that one issue because it doesn't benefit them, because they don't like it, because their feelings are hurt or whatever. And it's important to sort of, when people ask us that, well, we obviously answer that obviously we support the liberation of Ukrainian people, but it's also important to sort of contextualize that and put it into one sort of thing being like, well, yes, we're against whatever you might call it, like colonialism, imperialism, and to base our rhetoric off of that being like, well, you support Ukrainians, we also support them, and we also support these and these people. We don't want to be discriminatory, and we are not discriminatory in any single way. We want justice and equality and ability to live good lives for all people who are seeking them. And so this, I think, yeah, the gotcha points is something to be wary of and to understand that those are not good intentioned arguments that they're using. It's more so to deflect attention.
Just a few points. That's it's also like this about whataboutism. No, I agree with that. But let's add this. Because that's also important. That's also important. That's also important. Yeah. So, but with Palestinian flag, the thing is, I never use it myself. Like on my hand, I have Handela, for example, and on my other hand, I have like tattoos of Mahmoud Darwish, and I wear kufiya usually because I think it's the best scarf in the world, because it's really comfortable, but I never ever used the Palestinian flag. But having in mind how Zionist hates Palestinian flag, and that's everywhere. It's like, this is why we have the symbol of watermelon, no, because we cannot use Palestinian flag in certain circumstances. That you know, like, I don't care much about national anthems, but you know, with Palestine also, I don't know if you know the story that Palestine have two national anthems, even though they do not really have a state. And one of the anthems is actually the anthem of Iraq. It's, but like official is not that one, but they also, if you meet Palestinians and ask like which anthem to play, they will not agree on that. So, but if you play a Moutani in the streets, like somewhere in Jerusalem, you can be arrested. So that's why I think use Palestinian flags as much as possible everywhere, anywhere. But it's not exactly supporting like the nation-state solution, which is also colonial heritage, no? Because when we said after the Second World War that they have to leave like all colonies and grant them the right to self-determination, they meant in the sense that the only possible solution is nation state. So I also do not agree that's the only possible solution. And also, like, but in that case, because of Palestinian symbol, I would use it, even though I personally did not use it, but I support it everywhere.
So I was also thinking about this public discourse that is going on in Lithuania, and in terms of militarization, I was thinking about this that we will never support Palestine in Lithuania because we're the glorification of military and also the Israeli army. And it's sort of in terms like we mentioned this normalization of everything, like pushbacks, but we also normalize this kind of military, industrial complex as well. And this talks about like, it will never be kind of for sure useful to support Palestinian side because of like how we want Americans to support Ukraine, how we want Americans to support us in this kind of threat of Russia. And I also thinking that there is this kind of machine that helps very much, this kind of propaganda machine in terms of like how Russia uses it and then how people like receive it. The same like this, there is this kind of fake news moment. So people can be lost. Like really, it's like you can actually see it's like even in so like we were marching in Kaunas, like Palestinian protest, pro-Palestinian, and there were people who were shouting at us that we are like Russian supporters and we don't understand anything, and this is that we are lost and we are stupid, like this useful stupidity. So, like, that's my, the question is, do you believe that we ever have this kind of side? Because, like, I noticed this changing to, like, Justina said that, like, we always see towards what Americans say. So if Americans say, but when the Americans say that, like, okay, this is maybe not good what Israeli is doing, I only see like these like fragments that like, okay, maybe like there is one article in RT that would be like questioning why we're not, what is going on there. Like maybe we should think about it. But on the like large scale, I don't see it happening like in any way.
Interestingly, there's, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, there's one member of parliament who said anything in support of Palestine. So you have democracy with political parties, and I think there are probably more discussions about Ukraine. I mean, whether to support it or not, there's probably more discussion in that sense, which is ridiculous than in Palestine. So. I don't know. I don't think.
No matter what the reason says, definitely there will be time, because in many various like histories, but we are going and so on, you do not know when it will be click, because you cannot predict. At some point, we couldn't vote as women, no. And I think it was not possible. How can you change on what earth, like a man would give a woman to vote, like they themselves, like how would give this right to vote? But suffragists used Molotov cocktails and stuff like this, and somehow we are here. So I think that militarism is a current situation. It's not it's not impossible to go back. And also we have, for example, concerning like we normalized the pushbacks, but at some point it was normal to let people through the border in. So we understood the international law and the importance. And I'm sorry, going back to the international law, but this is like the highest standards, and it's still. If this is like where keeps us orientation what's good and bad. And after the Second World War, we had the Geneva Conventions concerning international humanitarian law. So I believe that at some point, we don't know, even in the lowest point of like deep as the hopelessness, there is a possibility that it will change because something would click. We will find connections with Palestinians, and we were occupied by Russians. So I honestly do not understand how I do not feel more parallels with Palestine, but maybe one day it will click.
Well, I see a scenario that the United States flips, and then if they do, we will go like that.
In terms of imagining like a politics that's beyond like what we kind of inherit from the dominant geopolitical reality, the position of Lithuanians who went through a process of kind of dual politicization, first in response to Ukraine, which kind of mobilized a massive amount of people and also led to mutual aid initiatives. And then we have people who then, from those experiences, at least some went through another socialization, politicization through Palestine. And their position is very interesting because they basically, in holding these two positions, respectively, they kind of like defy essentially the geopolitical, like a geopolitically defined politics. And it's like, where does that open up is an interesting question, because they're on one hand like now NATO critical, but also having, you know, remaining in defense of Ukraine. So where does that place them? I guess it places them like from geopolitics and the kind of cold machinations of kind of probability and order and the rule of law into something like an ethics, which is an interesting place to explore. And also I think something somehow beyond the nation state, which we must kind of in some way usurp as part of these movements of solidarity.
Right, so I think that it's, you know, like talking about Palestine now, like we probably all want to do something about it, but also the discussions that we had from like the border station to to generally like Islamophobia, it all sort of comes back to what one of you mentioned is the systems, right? So like the systems change, and this is sort of looking long term, and I know it's really, there's no straightforward answer to this, but I keep thinking about how can we, because in Lithuania we obviously have like huge information gaps, like our knowledge production is incredibly Western centric, and I keep thinking like what maybe you just have generally thoughts about sort of how can, like what's the best approach towards like actually bringing in some like systemic change to that, because I think it all, like a lot of it comes down to the question of how do we change those sort of systems of thinking, because we do know that at some point when people form their opinions, like it becomes quite hard to change that. Like during the schooling system, they do get exposed to certain like history of Europe, like Lithuania. There's a sort of huge regionality in our sort of understanding of the world. Yeah, and you know, I lived in the UK for quite a few years, and in the 80s, it was, I mean, the UK has a generally different context because it was a former like empire, it colonized places, but so you do see sort of pockets from the 80s development towards like more international stance and more looking to perspectives of different countries, and essentially, do you have any thoughts on how we could change those systems of thinking?
I wanted to first maybe comment on Noah's question/comment. I think it's also very interesting that the dualization of the politics is happening in the Baltics, and it's partially because, not partially, but our sort of, a lot of the support that we are giving and gave to Ukraine from the very moment onwards was ethnically based. It wasn't like social justice based, it was more so based on who our enemy is. And this sort of Palestine issue for a lot of people is something like there's a reason why there are a lot fewer people who are pro-Palestinian than pro-Ukrainian, because their sort of activism for Ukrainian people, Ukrainian refugees, Ukrainian people suffering from the war, doesn't come from actual like moral compass or ethics or being like, well, we actually want to help people. It's more so comes from like this feeling of vengeance or nationalism or ethnic sort of bias that we have for one group or another. And it's important to, I think, merge those two, not merge actually, no, to understand that we should actually focus not on the ethnic side of aspect, because it's never really helpful. It's never, you can never really pinpoint to a nation and be like, oh, those guys are the bad guys because of their ethnicity, race, or like any social category or background that they adhere to or been given like the monocle of. And in regards to the systems question, I think it's in the context of what's happening in the UK right now. It's also very like telling, and in my opinion is very connected, because for capitalism needs sort of an enemy to exist. It's what's happening in the UK. The riots is just the usual divide and conquer strategy for capitalists. Either the billionaires or the politicians, they need somebody for the people to focus on. And nowadays, because of all the different crises that happened in the last 10, 20 years in the Middle East, those people are usually black and brown people who are coming from Arab countries or African countries seeking a better life. And it's important to sort of, when we talk about this and when we talk to other people, to say that we shouldn't, not that we shouldn't, but it doesn't make sense to focus on the most marginalized, the most discriminated people who basically don't have anything, who, for example, are refugees, or who, for example, even in the UK, they've been living for, I don't know, 100 years or 200 years before that. It doesn't necessarily matter. What matters, in my opinion, is to connect the struggles that all those people face, be it at work, I don't know, in school, in university, or something like that, and make it more so about like one single system that doesn't focus on any sort of ethnic, racial background, but more so on the systemic structural issues, helping people, eliminating poverty, increasing working condition, wages, stuff like that.
Maybe the last question. I can see people are gathering food counter.
Yeah, I'm slightly irritated by this discussion, which is more about us, or I'm not Baltic, or even East Europeans, or I'll say about you, than about Palestine. And you finished with this question, Tadas, about what do we do, how do we go forward. In the organizing that I do in my local group in the Netherlands for Palestine, it is a basic idea that the Palestinians are in the lead, and we are very much in touch with our local Palestinian community. And I think many speakers today mentioned how why not caring about Palestine is connected to Islamophobia. So get in touch with the Islamic communities in your countries, in your cities, involve them in your activism. And do not try to, which is how I interpret some of what I've heard today, to use the Palestinian struggle as a kind of solution for your own. Yeah, I don't even know how to say it. What I want to say, it's going to be this place is going to explode. But like, the Palestinians will tell you why it's good to use the Palestinian flag. They don't. If you are anarchist and you, I don't know, you're thinking, how can we struggle against a nation state? Fine, think about this, discuss about it. Do not put this burden on the people who are facing everything that they are facing, you know? This thing. So I think this discussion was very much about yourselves and why do people not care? Yeah, maybe that was the point. In that case, fair, but yeah. Free Palestine!
I think people here understood your point. I mean, I saw you were worried that it's not gonna come across. I think, yeah, of course, that goes through my mind. I mean, from many years of being involved in certain circles, the idea of let them speak is always the first thing that you think of, right? I agree. So aside from very formal, not formal, but like practical reasons, which would have made it difficult to have this discussion in other ways, my idea was that the people here, I mean, you came to Lithuania, and I think you came to the place where the concentration of people who know what's happening in Gaza and who care about Gaza is the biggest that you can ever get in Lithuania anywhere. I mean, maybe in a couple of social centers that we have, when there's a party supporting Palestine or something, that maybe you would find a bigger concentration. But here, I mean, the first question that I started with, the number of hands that went up, the ratio of them, if you spread across Lithuania, I mean, I don't know, it would be 1 in tens of thousands or something like that. Or, of course, there are anti-Semites who really care about Palestine, but that's another question. So I agree with your criticism, I understand it, but the idea was to, you know, I don't think we need a Palestinian here to tell how horrible things are there, here, in this gathering. We do need them, and we do work on the fact. I mean, one of the first things I did as somebody who has microphone and knows how to use it, I interviewed people from Palestine. So you're completely right. I don't think this was the context, and therefore I wanted in this context to talk about us, because if we are successful in any way of today talking and thinking about it, because as I understood, many people never thought of this. So do we really care about Gaza, or, you know, didn't spend much time thinking about it? Maybe the outcome will be that people will start thinking more, and maybe the next time somebody from the lovely people here who organize protests in Lithuania, when they organize, maybe more people who are here today will come. Okay, anything else? Yeah, on a very happy panel about very simple things, we closed the last panel of Kombinatas Festival. So, thank you very much. Thank you for participating.